Hey guys, tonight we are drifting away from the waking world into the soft, shadowy embrace of ancient Greek slumber to explore how a very special, rather artistic deity named Morpheus was believed to craft the very dreams that flickered through the minds of mortals. Imagine yourself lying on a simple couch in an ancient Athenian home, the scent of olive oil lamps faintly perfuming the air, the city quieting outside. As your eyelids grow heavy, you're not just falling asleep. You're potentially opening a door for a divine messenger, a shaper of nocturnal visions to step into your mind and paint a unique, fleeting masterpiece. This isn't just random brain activity we're talking about here, for the ancient Greeks' dreams were often potent messages, omens, or even visits from the gods themselves, carefully curated by specialized dream deities. And honestly, if you had to rely on ancient Greek dream interpretation without a good modern therapist on speed dial, you probably wouldn't survive the anxiety of figuring out if that dream about a flying goat meant good fortune, or just that you ate too many figs before bed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, maybe drop a comment to let us know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always wonderful to see our global community of curious minds and sleepy scholars gathering. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel that gentle pull, that lovely weighted sensation as consciousness begins to soften at the edges. You're entering the realm of Hypnos, the Greek god of sleep, a powerful but generally benevolent deity who offered mortals respite from their daily toils. But Hypnos didn't work alone in this shadowy kingdom. He had a whole family, a rather artistic and somewhat enigmatic brood, dedicated to the various facets of the sleep experience. And among them, standing out for his particular skill, was his son Morpheus, the one who specialized in shaping and delivering dreams, specifically dreams that featured human forms. He was, in essence, the divine character actor of the dream world, capable of mimicking any mortal with flawless precision. The ancient Greeks, much like many cultures throughout history, placed great significance on dreams. They weren't simply seen as random firings of a tired brain or a replay of the day's anxieties, though they could certainly reflect those too. Dreams were often considered to be messages from the gods, prophecies, warnings, or even divine visitations. This is a mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greek society, dreams were widely regarded as a means by which the gods communicated with mortals, offering guidance, omens, or direct instructions, and their interpretation was a serious and often sought-after practice. Therefore, the beings responsible for delivering these dreams held a special, if somewhat shadowy, place in their mythology. Morpheus wasn't just some vague, abstract concept of dreaming. He was a specific entity described by poets like Ovid in his Metamorphoses as having a distinct role and remarkable abilities. His name itself derives from the Greek word morphe, meaning form or shape, a direct nod to his talent for crafting lifelike human figures in the minds of sleepers. Imagine him as a divine sculptor or painter, but his medium wasn't clay or pigment. It was the very fabric of your sleeping consciousness. He could fashion a perfect likeness of your long-lost grandfather, your secret crush, or even a king from a distant land, complete with their voice, their gait, their characteristic frown or smile. It was his job to make these dream humans so convincing that you, the sleeper, would have no doubt as to their identity. No blurry, out-of-focus dream characters when Morpheus was on duty. He was all about that high-definition realism, ancient Greek style. But why all this effort? Why have a dedicated god just for human forms and dreams? Well, for the Greeks, messages often came through human interaction, even divine ones. If Zeus wanted to send a warning to a king, it was often more effective if that warning was delivered by a figure the king knew and trusted, or perhaps feared appearing in a dream. Morpheus was the divine go-between, the one who could seamlessly insert these godly communiques into a believable human narrative within the dreamscape. He was the ultimate method actor of Olympus, though his stage was the sleeping mind. There's a quirky though less substantiated tidbit from some folkloric interpretations that suggests Morpheus might have had a particular fondness for appearing as elderly, wise figures when delivering important messages, as their pronouncements would naturally carry more weight. Or perhaps he enjoyed the challenge of mimicking particularly complex or well-known individuals, a sort of divine character study. Maybe he even had a portfolio of his best dream impersonations, though that's probably just our modern brains trying to picture his divine resume. So, as you begin to drift further, now imagine this shadowy artist Morpheus perhaps already considering your own sleeping mind as a potential canvas. What forms might he choose for you tonight? Whose face will he borrow to deliver the fleeting narratives that will fill your slumber? The Greeks believed this was not a haphazard process. Historians still argue whether the Greeks believed all dreams came from divine sources, or if they distinguished between divinely sent oneiroi dreams and more mundane, psychologically driven dreams. But for those significant, vivid dreams, the ones that lingered in the mind long after waking, Morpheus and his kin were the likely artist. You're now gently suspended in that liminal space between waking and true slumber, the perfect state to appreciate the arrival of a dream crafted by Morpheus. But before we delve deeper into his artistic methods, let's take a moment to understand his rather illustrious and decidedly shadowy parentage. Morpheus, our divine dream shaper, hailed from a lineage steeped in the primordial forces of the cosmos, a family that governed the very rhythms of night sleep and the fleeting world of dreams. He wasn't just some minor daemon who happened to be good at illusions. He was part of an ancient and powerful dynasty. The most common and certainly most poetic account of Morpheus's origins, primarily from Roman poet Ovid, who greatly elaborated on the Greek understanding names his father as Somnus, the Roman equivalent of the Greek god Hypnos, the personification of sleep itself. Hypnos was a potent deity capable of lulling even Zeus, the king of the gods, into slumber, though usually only at Hera's mischievous instigation and often with risky consequences for Hypnos himself. He was generally seen as a gentle, benevolent god, bringing rest to weary mortals and gods alike, often depicted with wings or carrying a poppy stalk or a horn, from which he would pour sleep-inducing vapors. If Hypnos was your father, you'd naturally have a close connection to the world of sleepers. But the lineage goes even deeper into the very fabric of the cosmos as the Greeks perceived it. Hypnos himself, and therefore Morpheus by extension, was the son of an even more ancient and formidable goddess Nyx, the primordial goddess of night. Nyx was one of the very first beings to emerge from chaos, the void that existed before creation. She was a figure of immense power and mystery, her shadowy veil covering the world each evening. Even Zeus was said to hold Nyx in awe and respect, reluctant to anger her. This is a mainstream historical fact. In Greek mythology, Hypnos' sleep and his twin brother Thanatos' death are almost universally described as the sons of Nyx night, often with Erebus darkness as their father, placing Morpheus as Hypnos' son firmly within this lineage of primal nocturnal deities. So Morpheus is the grandson of night itself. Imagine the kind of hereditary traits that come with such ancestry. A natural affinity for darkness, silence, and the hidden realms of consciousness. His workplace, the minds of sleepers, was his grandmother's domain. This divine heritage imbued Morpheus and his brothers, the oneiroi, the dreams, with a natural authority and ability to move unseen and unheard, flitting through the shadows to deliver their crafted visions. They were quite literally children of the night. The mother of Morpheus in Ovid's telling isn't explicitly named with the same consistency as Nyx being his grandmother. Sometimes Pasithea, one of the younger Graces chariots, personifying relaxation, meditation, and other altered states of consciousness, is mentioned as a wife of Hypnos, and thus potentially a mother, to Morpheus and his brothers. This would add a touch of grace and artistry to his lineage, fitting for a god whose work was to craft beautiful or convincing forms. The family business, so to speak, was all about the various states of being that occurred when the sun went down. Nyx brought the darkness. Her son Hypnos brought the blessed oblivion of sleep. And then Hypnos' sons, the oneiroi, including our Morpheus, populated that sleep with dreams. It was a whole nocturnal service industry run by one extended, very powerful, and probably quite pale divine family. You can almost picture the family gatherings, very quiet, dimly lit affairs with lots of yawning and hushed conversations about the day's, or rather night's work. Did you see the dream I sent to Agamemnon Masterpiece, if I do say so myself? Morpheus might whisper to his father over a cup of poppy seed tea. There's a quirky, less common mythological variant, or poetic interpretation that sometimes suggests the oneiroi, including Morpheus, were born directly from Nyx alone parthenogenetically, like some of her other shadowy offspring such as Doomblame and Deceit. This would make them even more directly tied to the primal power of Night Brothers to Hypnos, rather than his sons. Genealogies in Greek mythology can be wonderfully fluid and contradictory depending on the poet or the region. Historians still argue whether the conception of a single personified Morpheus as chief dreambringer was a later poetic development perhaps popularized by Ovid, or if he existed as a distinct figure in earlier, more widespread Greek folk belief about the nature of dreams. Regardless of the precise branches on the family tree, the core truth remains. Morpheus was a creature of the nightkin to sleep and darkness. This lineage gave him not only his abilities, but also his realm of operation. He wasn't a god who basked in the Olympian sun. His work was done in the hidden subconscious landscapes of the sleeping world. He and his brothers were the quiet artists, the unseen messengers who moved under the cloak of their grandmother Nyx, using the peace brought by their father Hypnos as the canvas for their fleeting, powerful creations. Understanding this dark and potent heritage helps us appreciate the unique nature of Morpheus's craft and the deep significance dreams held for those ancient Greek sleepers who welcomed, or perhaps sometimes dreaded, his nightly visitations. You're now familiar with Morpheus's rather impressive and shadowy family tree grandson of Night herself, son of Sleep. This lineage perfectly equipped him for his nocturnal duties. But Morpheus didn't handle the entire dreamcrafting business single-handedly. While he was the specialist in sending dreams featuring human forms, he had brothers collectively known as the Oniroi, the personifications of dreams who each had their own unique area of expertise in the art of dream fabrication. Together, they formed a kind of divine dream team, capable of populating the minds of sleepers with a vast array of visions, from the mundane to the terrifying, from the prophetic to the utterly bizarre. Think of them as the special effects department of the ancient Greek dream world. The most prominent of Morpheus's brothers, and the ones most often mentioned alongside him, particularly in Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is our richest source for these details, were Aislus, also called Phobator by mortals, and Phantasos. Each had a distinct role complementing Morpheus's own specialization. This is a mainstream historical fact. In Greek mythology, particularly as detailed by Ovid, Morpheus was one of the Oniroi, the personified dream spirits, and his brothers included Aislus, Phobator, who shaped dreams of animals and monsters, and Phantasos, who created dreams of inanimate objects and illusions. Let's start with Morpheus himself as the lead artist in many ways. As we've touched upon, his name comes from morphe, meaning form or shape. His unique talent was the incredibly skillful imitation of human beings. He could replicate any mortal's appearance, their voice, their mannerisms, their very way of walking or gesturing with uncanny accuracy. If a god wanted to send a dream in which a specific person appeared, whether a loved one, an enemy, or a wise counselor, Morpheus was the one dispatched. He would slip into the sleeper's mind cloaked in the guise of this chosen individual, delivering messages or enacting scenarios with such realism that the dreamer would be utterly convinced of the apparition's authenticity. He was the master of the human cameo in your nightly mental movie. Then there was Aislus. The gods, it seems, called him Aislus, perhaps from the Greek word eikalos, meaning like, or resembling, referring to his imitative skills in his own domain. Mortals, however, knew him by a more ominous name, Phobiator, meaning the frightener, or the terrifier, derived from phobosphere, which also gives us our word phobia. And for good reason. Phobator's specialty was crafting dreams that featured animals, beasts, birds, serpents, any kind of creature real or monstrous. If you had a terrifying nightmare about being chased by a slavering three-headed dog from the underworld, or a more benign dream of soaring through the sky on the back of a majestic eagle, that was likely the handiwork of Phobator. He was the divine creature creator of the dreamscape, capable of conjuring both the beautiful and the utterly horrifying, from the animal kingdom or even beyond it into the realm of chimeras and dragons. His visits were probably a bit more memorable and not always in a good way. If Morpheus was the subtle character actor, Phobator was the monster maker, the director of your internal creature features. The third key brother in this dream-weaving trio was Phantasos. His name comes from the Greek word phantasma, meaning apparition, image, or illusion. giving us our word fantasy. Thanatos' domain was the inanimate world. He was the one who shaped dreams featuring earth rocks, water trees, houses, and all manner of man-made or natural objects. If you dreamt of wandering through a surreal, shifting landscape of a familiar house suddenly having extra rooms, or of inanimate objects behaving in strange and symbolic ways, like a talking sword or a weeping statue that was Thanatos at play. He didn't deal in living forms, but in the deceptive and often symbolic imagery of the world around us, or even worlds that couldn't possibly exist. He was the master of surreal set design and inanimate illusions, capable of creating dream environments that were beautiful, unsettling, or deeply puzzling. You can imagine him as the one responsible for those dreams, where the geography just doesn't quite make sense, or where objects take on a life of their own. The Salvador Dali of the Oneiroi, perhaps. Together, these three brothers, Morpheus, Phobetor, Iceless, and Thanatos, could supposedly account for all the varied forms and figures that appeared in dreams. Morpheus handled the human cast, Phobetor the animal kingdom, and monstrous extras and Thanatos the sets, props, and special effects. It was a comprehensive service. Ovid tells us that these three were the most important of the 1,000 sons of Somnus Hypnos, the rest being a more general crowd of unnamed dream spirits, perhaps responsible for the more muddled, less distinct dreams, the background noise of the sleeping mind. There's a quirky little thought that these brothers might have had a friendly, professional rivalry. Perhaps Morpheus prided himself on the subtlety of his human impersonations, while Phobetor reveled in the visceral impact of his terrifying beasts and Thanatos took delight in the sheer weirdness of his illusory landscapes. Did you see how Agamemnon jumped when I sent him that chimera last night? Phobetor might boast. Yes, dear brother. Morpheus might reply with a sigh, but did his treasurer believe it was really his long-lost uncle advising him on fiscal policy? That's the true art. Historians still argue whether the specific delineation of these three oneiroi with their specialized roles was a common belief throughout ancient Greece, or if it was more of a literary systematization by poets like Ovid, who loved to organize and detail the mythological world. Earlier Greek sources like Homer speak more generally of oneiroi dreams, as entities that could be sent by gods without necessarily naming Morpheus or his brothers as the sole craftsmen. However, the concept of dreams having different forms and origins was certainly ancient. These divine artisans, under the gentle reign of their father Hypnos and the shadowy cloak of their grandmother Nyx, worked tirelessly each night, flitting from one sleeping mortal to another. They were the unseen weavers of our nightly narratives, the painters of our internal landscapes, the sculptors of our fears and desires in ephemeral form. Understanding their distinct roles helps us appreciate the richness and complexity the ancient Greeks attributed to the world of dreams, a world meticulously crafted by specialized divine hands. You're now acquainted with the divine dream team, Morpheus, the expert in human guises, and his brothers Phobetor, the animal and monster specialist, and Thanatos, the master of inanimate illusions. Together, these oneiroi populated the sleep of ancient Greeks with a rich tapestry of visions. But where did these dream weavers reside? Where was their workshop, their studio, their point of origin from which they launched their nightly expeditions into mortal minds? The ancient Greeks, with their love for mapping out the cosmos and its various realms, had a specific, if rather shadowy, location for the abode of dreams. A mysterious land often situated at the very edges of the known world, close to the realm of the dead, a place of perpetual twilight. This land of dreams was said to be near the dark realm of Erebos, the primordial darkness that lay beneath the earth, and often associated with the deep, sunless caverns where Hypnos, the god of sleep, had his dwelling. It was a place removed from the sunlit world of waking life, a liminal space between reality and nothingness. Ovid, in his Metamorphoses, gives us one of the most vivid descriptions of this domain. He paints a picture of a deep, silent cave, impenetrable to the sun's rays, where Hypnos resides in a perpetual Cimmerian gloom. There are no sounds here, no crowing cocks, no barking dogs, no rustling leaves. Only in profound, unnerving stillness, conducive to eternal slumber. It's not exactly a cheerful holiday destination, more like the ultimate sensory deprivation chamber. Around Hypnos' ebony couch, poppies and other sleep-inducing herbs were said to grow abundantly, their drowsy influence permeating the air. And it is from this profoundly quiet, deeply shadowed place that the Oneiroi, including Morpheus, were said to emerge. They were the inhabitants of this land of sleep and shadows, their forms perhaps as ephemeral and shifting as the dreams they crafted, until they took on a specific guise to enter a mortal's mind. This is a mainstream historical fact. In Greek mythology, the Oneiroi dreams were believed to dwell in a land at the edges of the world, often in the darkness of Erebos, near the realm of hypnos sleep, and the gates leading to the underworld, emphasizing their connection to night mystery and the threshold between life and death. A key feature of this land of dreams, famously described by both Homer in the Odyssey and Virgil in the Aeneid, though he was Roman, he was heavily influenced by Greek tradition, was the presence of two gates through which dreams passed to reach mortals. These were no ordinary gates. One was crafted from polished horn, and the other from gleaming sawn ivory. The nature of these gates was crucial, for they determined the truthfulness of the dreams that issued forth. Dreams that came through the gate of horn were believed to be true prophecies, genuine messages from the gods, or accurate premonitions. Horn, being a translucent natural material, was perhaps seen as allowing truth to pass through unaltered. So, if you were an ancient Greek and had a particularly significant dream, you'd be desperately hoping it was a gate of horn special delivery. Conversely, dreams that passed through the gate of ivory were considered to be false, deceptive, and illusory. Ivory, being opaque and easily carved into elaborate, beautiful, but ultimately artificial forms, symbolized deceit and illusion. These dreams might be meaningless phantasms, wishful thinking, or even deliberate deceptions sent to lead mortals astray. Trying to figure out which gate your dream had passed through was, as you can imagine, a major source of anxiety and a key task for ancient Greek dream interpreters. It was like trying to discern a genuine email from a very convincing phishing scam, but with potentially divine consequences. So Morpheus and his brothers, when dispatched by Hypnos, or by one of the Olympian gods, would have to choose their exit portal carefully, depending on the nature of the message they carried. If Zeus wanted to send a true warning to a king, Morpheus would presumably be directed to the Gate of Horn. If a mischievous lesser deity, or perhaps just the sleeper's own anxieties, wanted to conjure a confusing or misleading vision, the Gate of Ivory was the way to go. There's a quirky little geographical detail sometimes associated with the Land of Dreams, its proximity to the River Lethe, one of the rivers of the underworld whose waters brought forgetfulness. It makes a certain poetic sense. To enter deep sleep and the world of dreams, one must forget the cares and concerns of the waking world. Perhaps the Oneiroi themselves were immune to Lethe's waters, or maybe they carried a bit of its forgetful essence with them, explaining why dreams can be so vivid one moment and frustratingly elusive upon waking. I had the most amazing dream from Morpheus last night. If only I could remember what it was about. Must have been an Ivory Gate special with a side of Lethe. Historians still argue about the precise symbolic origins of the gates of horn and ivory. Some suggest it might be a sophisticated wordplay in ancient Greek, as the word for horn keras is similar to the word for fulfill kranon, and the word for ivory elephas is similar to the word for deceive elepharestai. Others see it as a more straightforward material symbolism. Regardless of the exact etymological roots, the imagery of the two gates was a powerful and enduring one in the ancient Greek understanding of dreams, emphasizing their dual nature as potential sources of profound truth or profound confusion. So when you imagine Morpheus setting out on his nightly task, picture him emerging from this deep, silent, poppy-strewn cavern, perhaps with a nod to his slumbering father Hypnos, and making his way to one of these fateful gates, ready to carry his carefully crafted visions through the veil of night into the minds of unsuspecting or perhaps eagerly awaiting Greek sleepers. His journey began in a land of perpetual twilight, a place as mysterious and ephemeral as the dreams themselves. You've now journeyed with us to the very threshold of the dream world, the shadowy land of Erebos, where Hypnos reigns and from which the Oneiroi, the dream. Spirits emerge through the fateful gates of horn or ivory. Among these divine dream crafters, Morpheus holds a special distinction, a unique and highly refined talent that made him indispensable for many of the most significant nocturnal messages. He was the undisputed master of shaping himself, or the dreams he carried into the exact likeness of human beings. While his brothers Phobetor and Phantasos dealt with animals, monsters, and inanimate objects, Morpheus was the specialist in all things human. His very name, as we've learned, comes from the Greek word morphe, meaning form, shape, or figure. This wasn't just a casual descriptor, it was the essence of his divine function. Ovid in his Metamorphoses describes Morpheus with great admiration for this particular skill. He tells us that no other dream spirit could so artfully mimic the walk, the features, the voice, and even the clothing and characteristic habits of any given mortal. When Morpheus appeared in a dream, he became that person down to the smallest, most convincing detail. It was a flawless impersonation designed to ensure that the dreamer accepted the apparition without question. This is a mainstream historical fact. Morpheus, as depicted in classical sources like Ovid's Metamorphoses, was renowned among the Oneiroi for his specific ability to take on human form, perfectly imitating the appearance, voice, and mannerisms of any mortal to deliver messages in dreams. Imagine the level of artistry involved. If a god wished to send a dream to Penelope, the grieving wife of Odysseus, featuring the image of her long-lost husband Morpheus, would be the one to craft that vision. He wouldn't just conjure a vague, shadowy figure. He would study the essence of Odysseus, his build, the way he carried himself, the timbre of his voice, perhaps even the familiar scent of sea salt and adventure that clung to him. Morpheus would then weave these elements into a dream, so vivid, so heartbreakingly real, that Penelope would awaken with the fleeting certainty of having truly seen her husband. Or consider a king who needed a divine warning. Morpheus might appear as a trusted advisor or revered ancestor, or even the king's own son, delivering the message with the weight and familiarity that only a known human form could convey. It wasn't just about delivering lines, it was about embodying a character, a truly divine form of method acting. This specialization in human forms was crucial because so much of Greek life myth and religion revolved around human interactions and human-like gods. Messages were often best understood when delivered by a recognizable human figure. A prophecy might seem more potent if spoken by a long-dead seer, a warning more urgent if delivered by a concerned loved one. Morpheus provided this essential human interface for divine communication within the dreamscape. He was the master of disguise, the ultimate doppelganger, able to slip into the skin of any mortal to fulfill his nightly duties. You could say he had an unlimited wardrobe and a makeup kit stocked by the gods themselves. There's a quirky and rather amusing thought that Morpheus might have had to spend a fair bit of his daytime, if such a concept applies in the land of dreams, studying mortals. Perhaps he had a kind of divine people-watching perch, observing the nuances of human behavior, the subtle tics and gestures, the way different people carried their joys and sorrows. How else could he achieve such verisimilitude? Maybe he kept ethereal character sketches or mood boards for particularly important figures he might need to impersonate. Ah yes, King Priam of Troy. Note the slight stoop, the tremor in the left hand when distressed tendency to quote tragic poetry. It's a playful image, but it underscores the dedication to his craft implied by his reputation. The other Oneiroi, his brothers, had their own talents, of course. Phobetor could conjure a terrifying lion or a graceful swan, and Thanatos could make rivers flow uphill or statues weep in a dream. But when it came to the human element, the face-to-face encounter within a dream, Morpheus was unparalleled. Ovid even suggests that Morpheus was the one specifically chosen by his father, Hypnos, to be sent to kings and generals, those important mortals whose dreams could shape the fate of nations, precisely because of this skill in human impersonation. He was the reliable one for high-stakes, character-driven dream narratives. Historians still argue about the precise origins of Morpheus as a distinct named deity. While Ovid gives him prominence, earlier Greek texts often refer more generally to the Oneiros, singular dream spirit, or the Oneiroi, plural, without singling out Morpheus by name for this specific role. It's possible that the detailed characterization of Morpheus as the specialist in human forms was a later poetic or philosophical elaboration, a way to categorize and understand the diverse experiences of dreaming. However, the ancient Greek belief that dreams could feature incredibly realistic apparitions of known individuals was certainly widespread, and having a specific divine entity responsible for such vivid human portrayals makes mythological sense. So when an ancient Greek sleeper felt the presence of a familiar loved one in their dream, or saw a respected leader offering advice, or even an enemy delivering a threat, they might well have believed they were witnessing the artistry of Morpheus. He was the subtle weaver of human presence in the nocturnal theater of the mind, ensuring that the figures who walked through their dreams were not mere phantoms, but convincing lifelike beings, each shaped with divine skill and a profound understanding of mortal form. You now have a clearer picture of Morpheus, the divine master of human disguise, the artist who painted with the palette of mortal forms in the Gallery of Sleep. His ability to perfectly mimic any human was his unique gift among the Oneiroi. But how did he apply this talent? Let's imagine a specific scenario, a common trope in Greek myths and epics: a hero. A great warrior or king is at a critical juncture, perhaps on the eve of a momentous battle or facing a terrible decision. It is at such times that the gods often chose to intervene, and a dream crafted by Morpheus was one of their preferred methods of communication. So, let's witness in our mind's eye Morpheus undertaking the careful crafting of a significant, perhaps even prophetic dream for just such a slumbering hero. Our hero. Let's call him Leonidas for the sake of a noble name, lies asleep in his tent. The fate of his city, perhaps all of Greece, weighing heavily on his mind. The air is still, the campfires outside have died down to embers. This is when Morpheus, perhaps dispatched by Zeus himself or by Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare, would begin his work. His first task, guided by the divine will, would be to choose the perfect human form to deliver the message. Should it be a revered ancestor whose words would carry the weight of ancestral authority? Or perhaps a fallen comrade appearing with a ghostly warning? Or maybe even a deceptive image of a trusted friend designed to lead Leonidas down a particular path for the gods, as we know could be tricksy. For this instance, let's imagine Athena wishes to bolster Leonidas's courage, so she instructs Morpheus to appear as Leonidas's own wise and respected father who passed away years ago. Morpheus, the consummate actor, would then begin his transformation. He wouldn't just put on a father costume, he would become the father. He'd recall every detail, the way the old man's eyes crinkled at the corners. When he smiled, the slight limp he acquired after that unfortunate incident with the wild boar. The specific timbre of his voice when offering advice, even the familiar scent of olive wood and old linen that always clung to his robes. This is a mainstream historical fact. Dreams in ancient Greek literature, such as those in Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, often feature gods sending specific dream figures. Oneiroi, who take on the appearance of known mortals to deliver messages, warnings, or prophecies to key characters, particularly leaders and heroes at pivotal moments. For example, in the Iliad, Zeus sends a baleful dream in the guise of Nestor to deceive Agamemnon. Once the form is perfected, Morpheus, now the spitting image of Leonidas's beloved father, would gently insinuate himself into the hero's sleeping mind. He wouldn't burst in like a nightmare that was more his brother Phobetor's style. This was a delicate operation. The dream might begin subtly, perhaps with Leonidas finding himself in a familiar childhood haunt, a place where he often sought his father's counsel. Then the dream father would appear not as a ghostly apparition, but as solid and real as he was in life. The dialogue would be crucial. Morpheus, channeling the father's wisdom and perhaps imbued with Athena's divine message, would speak. The words would be carefully chosen, encouraging, perhaps offering a piece of strategic advice or reminding Leonidas of his duty, his strength, his lineage. The tone would be exactly right, resonating with Leonidas's deepest memories and respect for his father. My son, the dream father, might say, his voice a perfect echo from the past. Remember the strength of the oak, how it bends in the storm but does not break. Your city looks to you. Be that oak. Not exactly Shakespeare, but you get the gist, a bit of divine pep talk custom delivered. Morpheus would also craft the surrounding dreamscape to enhance the message. Perhaps the dream father appears holding a symbolic object, a laurel wreath for victory or an ancient family heirloom. The lighting in the dream might be significant, a soft encouraging glow or perhaps a more somber warning hue if the message was dire. Every detail from the expression on the dream father's face to the very air Leonidas seemed to breathe in the dream would be meticulously orchestrated by Morpheus to ensure the message was received and, most importantly, believed. There's a quirky, though purely imaginative tidbit we could add here. Perhaps Morpheus had a subtle signature. He left in his dreams a tiny, almost unnoticeable detail that was his artistic mark, like a specific recurring background flower or a particular glint of light. Or maybe when impersonating someone, he'd add one tiny, almost imperceptible flaw just to remind himself and the gods that it was an impersonation, a perfect copy but not the original, a nod to his own artistry and the illusory nature of dreams. Almost too perfect, a fellow Oneros might comment. Ah, but did you spot the slightly mismatched sandal buckles? Morpheus might reply with a wink. Historians still argue about the extent to which ancient Greeks believed that they could actively influence or solicit specific dreams, perhaps through rituals or incubation practices at healing sanctuaries, like those of Asclepius versus dreams being purely unsolicited divine interventions. If incubation was practiced, one might pray for a dream from a specific deity or ancestor, and Morpheus would then be the divine agent fulfilling that request, crafting the desired visitation. As the dream reached its climax, its message delivered, Morpheus would begin to withdraw the image of the dream father, perhaps fading gently, leaving Leonidas with a profound sense of having been truly visited, truly guided. Upon waking, our hero would be deeply moved, the dream's vividness and emotional impact making it feel utterly real. He might then rush to consult a dream interpreter or a seer to understand its full import, but the core message, so artfully delivered by Morpheus in a guise Leonidas could not ignore, would already be firmly planted in his heart and mind, perhaps stealing his resolve for the coming dawn and the battle that awaited. Such was the power and purpose of a hero's dream, meticulously crafted by Morpheus's divine hand. You've just witnessed the hypothetical, yet entirely plausible scenario of Morpheus the divine dream shaper, meticulously crafting a potent vision for a slumbering hero, perhaps altering the course of a battle or a kingdom with his artful impersonation. The dreams of kings and heroes, filled with prophecies, warnings, and divine guidance, were undoubtedly a significant part of Morpheus's portfolio. But what about the ordinary people of ancient Greece? The farmers, the fishermen, the merchants, the housewives? Did Morpheus or his kin also weave their nightly visions? Or were their dreams considered too mundane for divine intervention? While the grand, portentous dreams recorded in epics and tragedies often befell the great and powerful, it's unlikely that the ancient Greeks believed the gods of dreams entirely ignored the common populace. Sleep, after all, was a universal experience, and dreams in all their varied forms visited everyone from the slave in his humble cot to the aristocrat on his cushioned couch. While a peasant's dream might not decide the fate of an empire, it could certainly influence their personal hopes, fears, and daily decisions. It stands to reason that the Oneiroi, in their entirety, would have had a hand in shaping these more everyday nocturnal narratives as well. This is a mainstream historical fact. While epic literature focuses on the dreams of heroes and leaders, ancient Greek society as a whole valued dreams, and common people also sought interpretations for their nightly visions, suggesting a belief that their dreams too could hold meaning or divine influence. Perhaps Morpheus himself, the master of human forms, didn't always take on the grand guise of a long-dead king or a revered prophet for every single dream. Maybe for a simple farmer, worried about his olive harvest, Morpheus might send a dream, featuring the farmer's own sensible, experienced neighbor, offering a snippet of practical, reassuring advice about when to pick the olives. Or for a young woman pining for a particular young man, Morpheus might craft a fleeting sweet dream where the object of her affection smiles at her in the marketplace. These wouldn't be earth-shattering prophecies, but small personal visions reflecting the dreamer's own life, their anxieties, and their desires. Alternatively, perhaps Morpheus delegated these more routine human interest stories to some of his less famous unnamed brothers among the thousands of Oneiroi. He might have focused on the VIP dreamers while a whole host of junior dreamweavers handled the everyday accounts. All right, team, Hypnos might announce at the nightly dream briefing. Morpheus, you've got King Agamemnon again. Zeus wants him to feel overconfident. The rest of you spread out among the Athenian citizenry. We've got a lot of anxiety about the price of fish to work through tonight. It's a whimsical image, but it speaks to the idea that all dreams in some way might have a touch of divine artistry. And let's not forget Morpheus's specialized brothers. Phobetor, the shaper of animals and monsters, wouldn't reserve his talents solely for heroic nightmares. A fisherman might dream of a monstrous kraken threatening his boat, a manifestation of his daily perils at sea. A shepherd might dream of wolves circling his flock, a direct reflection of his waking fears. These weren't necessarily divine warnings, but rather Phobetor giving form to the anxieties already present in the dreamer's mind, perhaps as a way for the subconscious to process them. Or maybe sometimes he just did it for a bit of divine amusement. Let's see how this goat herd reacts to a dream about a talking goat with eagle wings. That should liven up his Tuesday. Similarly, Thanatos, the master of inanimate illusions and surreal landscapes, would have had plenty to work with in the dreams of common folk. A merchant might dream of his wares inexplicably turning to dust or of a road that twists and turns into an impossible labyrinth. A potter might dream of her clay vessel speaking to her, or of her kiln producing objects of unearthly beauty or terrifying strangeness. These dreams filled with symbolic objects and shifting environments could be deeply puzzling or surprisingly insightful, reflecting the dreamer's creative impulses, their worries about their livelihood, or simply the brain's love for a bit of nocturnal surrealism expertly stage managed by Phantasos. There's a quirky little tidbit from some analyses of ancient Greek folklore and personal accounts. Though direct evidence is scarce for commoners' dreams that suggests everyday dreams often revolved around very practical concerns: health, family, crops, livestock, and small social interactions. A dream about teeth falling out. A surprisingly ancient and common anxiety dream might send a peasant scurrying to a local wise woman for an interpretation, just as a noble might consult a temple oracle about a more grandiose vision. The scale might be different, but the underlying human need to find meaning in the strange narratives of sleep was universal. Historians still argue about the precise degree to which the average ancient Greek peasant or artisan actively attributed every dream to a specific divine sender, like Morpheus or his brothers, versus accepting some dreams as merely empty or products of indigestion or daily stress. There was likely a spectrum of belief, with particularly vivid, emotionally charged or unusual dreams being more readily seen as divinely crafted, while the more muddled, everyday dream fodder might have been dismissed more easily. But even in these seemingly mundane dreams, the touch of the Oneiroi could be imagined. They might not be sending epic prophecies, but they were still weaving the fabric of nightly experience, giving shape to the formless anxieties, the quiet hopes, the half-forgotten memories, and the everyday concerns that populated the minds of all ancient Greek sleepers, from the mightiest hero to the humblest olive farmer. Every dream in its own way was a little piece of divinely crafted art, a fleeting glimpse into another realm, courtesy of Morpheus and his talented, if sometimes unsettling family. You've now explored how Morpheus and his kin, the Oneiroi, might have tailored their dreamcraft not just for heroes and kings, but also for the everyday Greek citizen, weaving their hopes and fears into nightly visions. This broad reach of the dream gods suggests a deep connection between the divine and the sleeping mortal. And just as the gods had their ways of entering our minds, mortals too sometimes sought to invite or enhance the state of sleep, and dreaming occasionally with the help of certain potent gifts from nature, most notably the poppy. The imagery of the poppy is inextricably linked with Hypnos, the god of sleep, and by extension with his son Morpheus, the crafter of dreams, hinting at an ancient understanding of its sleep-inducing, dream-enhancing properties. The poppy, particularly Papaver, Somniferum, the opium poppy, has been known for its psychoactive and medicinal properties for thousands of years, long before the ancient Greeks. Its milky latex contains a cocktail of alkaloids, including morphine, named much later after Morpheus himself, codeine and papaverin, which have powerful analgesic, sedative, and hypnotic effects. The ancient Greeks were certainly aware of the poppy's ability to induce drowsiness and alleviate pain. This is a mainstream historical fact. Poppies, and specifically the opium derived from papaver, somniferum, were known and utilized in the ancient Mediterranean world, including by the Greeks, for their sedative and pain-relieving properties, and were frequently associated in mythology and art with deities of sleep, death, and agricultural abundance like Demeter. Hypnos, the god of sleep, is very often depicted in art and described in literature as carrying poppy stalks or a poppy head, or with poppies woven into a wreath on his brow. Sometimes he is shown pouring a sleep-inducing liquid from a horn, a concoction that was likely believed to contain poppy essence. His dwelling, that shadowy cave in Erebos we visited earlier, was said to be surrounded by fields of poppies, their drowsy influence contributing to the perpetual stillness and slumber of his realm. It's a powerful image, the god of sleep literally wreathed in the very plant that brings his gift to mortals. If Hypnos set the stage with his poppy-induced calm, then Morpheus had the perfect tranquil canvas upon which to paint his dreams. Given this strong association of poppies with his father Hypnos, it's natural to assume that Morpheus too operated within this soporific, poppy-scented atmosphere. Perhaps the dreams he crafted were themselves tinged with the languid, surreal quality that can accompany opium-induced states. Ovid describes Morpheus as having wings that moved with no sound, allowing him to flit silently into the bedchambers of sleepers. This ethereal silent movement is evocative of the gentle onset of poppy-induced sleep. Did the ancient Greeks consciously use poppies to induce or influence dreams, hoping for a visit from Morpheus? While direct prescriptions saying, take 2 poppies and call Morpheus in the morning, are lacking, it's highly plausible. Poppy extracts or preparations might have been used by physicians or wise women to help soothe restless sleepers, alleviate pain that prevented sleep, or perhaps even in ritual context, to encourage a receptive state for divinely sent dreams, especially in healing sanctuaries like those dedicated to Asclepius, where dream incubation, sleeping in a sacred place in hope of a diagnostic or healing dream, was practiced. A little poppy-induced relaxation might have made one more open to Morpheus's artistic endeavors. Or at the very least, it might make you less likely to wake up and spoil his masterpiece halfway through. There's a quirky little tidbit connected to the symbolism of the poppy, its myriad seeds. Some scholars have suggested that the poppy's countless tiny seeds could have symbolized the infinite number and variety of dreams that Hypnos and the Oneiroi could bestow upon mortals. Each tiny seed a potential dream waiting to be planted in the fertile ground of a sleeping mind. It's a rather poetic image linking the plant's physical form to its mythological function. Maybe Morpheus kept a pouch of extra special poppy seeds for his VIP clients, ensuring their dreams were particularly vivid and memorable. Of course, poppies weren't the only substances in the ancient Greek world known for their effects on the mind or body. Wine in moderation was a common relaxant, though too much could lead to a less pleasant, dreamless stupor, or a rather chaotic dreamscape not attributable to Morpheus's fine artistry. Various herbs were also used for medicinal and ritual purposes. Mandrake, for example, was known for its sedative and hallucinogenic properties, though it was also considered quite dangerous and its use likely restricted to specific controlled contexts. Historians still argue about the precise extent and nature of the use of psychoactive substances, including poppy derivatives, in mainstream ancient Greek religious or dream-related practices versus their more clearly documented medicinal applications for pain and sleep. While some theories propose more widespread ritual use to induce altered states for prophecy or divine communion, concrete evidence is often debated and open to interpretation. It's a fine line between a gentle sedative to aid sleep and a potent drug used to actively shape visionary experiences. But the imagery of the poppy, with its delicate nodding head and its promise of gentle oblivion and vivid dreams, remains powerfully linked to Hypnos and his son, Morpheus. It represents that soft surrender to the night, that moment when the conscious mind releases its grip and allows the dream weavers to begin their work. The poppy's embrace was, in a way, the overture to the opera of dreams, setting the stage for Morpheus to introduce his cast of characters and unfold his nightly narratives in the quiet theater of your slumbering mind. You're now comfortably nestled in the poppy-scented embrace of Hypnos, the god of sleep, a state of serene receptivity perfect for a visit from his son, Morpheus, the master dreamcrafter. As Morpheus prepares to dispatch his carefully fashioned visions into the minds of slumbering mortals, he and his fellow Oneiroi must choose which of 2 very specific, very significant portals to pass through the Gate of Horn or the Gate of Ivory. This choice was not arbitrary. It was laden with meaning, for it determined the very nature and truthfulness of the dream that would follow. These weren't just fancy exits from the land of dreams. They were critical arbiters of nocturnal veracity. This striking imagery of the 2 gates is one of the most enduring and fascinating aspects of the ancient Greek understanding of dreams, famously described by Homer in Book 19 of the Odyssey and later echoed by the Roman poet Virgil in Book 6 of the Aeneid. Penelope, the long-suffering wife of Odysseus, speaks of these gates as she recounts a perplexing dream to a disguised Odysseus. She explains that dreams which issue forth from the gate of sawn ivory are deceptive, bringing messages that will not be fulfilled, filled with empty hopes. However, dreams that pass through the gate of polished horn are true and portend events that will genuinely come to pass. This is a mainstream historical fact. The concept of 2 gates for dreams, one of horn for true dreams and one of ivory for false dreams, is a significant motif in classical literature, notably in Homer's Odyssey, reflecting the ancient Greek belief in the dual nature of dreams as potential sources of both truth and illusion. Imagine Morpheus having received his divine commission, perhaps from Zeus to send a true prophecy, or from a lesser, more mischievous deity, or even just the chaotic ether of dream stuff to send a confusing illusion. He would approach these two portals each with its distinct material and symbolic weight. The Gate of Horn, perhaps a more rustic, unadorned structure made from the translucent layered keratin of animal horns, allowed the truth to shine through, albeit sometimes in veiled or symbolic forms that still required careful interpretation. If Morpheus carried a divinely ordained vision, a genuine warning, or a glimpse of future events, this was his designated exit. The dreams passing through here were considered krinomenoi, those that are fulfilled. On the other hand, the Gate of Ivory stood gleaming, perhaps intricately carved, and beautiful to behold, fashioned from the dense, opaque, and valuable tusks of elephants. But this beauty was deceptive. Dreams that emerged from the Gate of Ivory were elepharomenoi, those that deceive. They might be mere wish fulfillment fantasies, anxieties given dramatic, but ultimately meaningless form, or even deliberate falsehoods sent to lead a sleeper astray. Ivory, being a material easily carved into intricate and pleasing but ultimately artificial shapes, symbolized this capacity for beautiful illusion and empty promises. So, if your dream featured you suddenly winning the ancient Greek lottery, which didn't exist but you get the idea, or your least favorite neighbor spontaneously combusting it, was probably an Ivory Gate special, not to be taken too seriously, however enjoyable the latter might have been. The implications for the ancient Greek dreamer were profound. Waking from a vivid dream, the first most pressing question would be, was it from horn or from ivory? The fate of individuals, families, and even cities could hang on the correct interpretation and the perceived origin of a significant dream. A king who dreamt of victory before a battle would be desperate to believe it came through the Gate of Horn. A commoner dreaming of sudden riches would be wise to suspect the smooth allure of ivory. This uncertainty added another layer of complexity and anxiety to the already mysterious world of dreams. It wasn't enough to have a dream, you had to figure out its provenance, its passport stamp from the land of Nod. There's a quirky little thought that perhaps the Oneiroi themselves sometimes got their gates mixed up, or that there was a mischievous gatekeeper who enjoyed sending a true dream through the ivory gate just to keep things interesting, or vice versa. Or maybe Morpheus, with his artistic temperament, sometimes preferred the aesthetic of the ivory gate for a particularly beautifully crafted, albeit ultimately false human drama he'd concocted. Oh, this one's too pretty for Horn. He might think it needs the pearly gleam of ivory, even if it's just to tell young Daphnis that Chloe will declare her love by Tuesday. She won't, of course, but the dream will be exquisite. Historians still argue about the deeper symbolic origins of the horn and ivory distinction. The most popular theory, as mentioned before, involves ancient Greek wordplay. Charis horn sounds like cranon, to fulfill, accomplish, and elephas ivory sounds like elepharisthai, to cheat, deceive. This linguistic connection would have made the symbolism immediately resonant for a Greek-speaking audience. Other interpretations look at the physical properties of the materials, horn being translucent and allowing light truth to pass, while ivory is opaque, beautiful but concealing. Whatever the precise origin, the imagery was incredibly powerful and became a standard literary and philosophical trope for discussing the nature of truth and illusion, not just in dreams, but in waking life as well. So when Morpheus and his brothers set out each night, they carried not just the content of the dream, but also the implicit stamp of its origin. Their choice of exit, or the gate they were directed to use by higher powers, was the first clue for the mortal world about how seriously to take the ensuing vision. It was a cosmic sorting office, separating the truly meaningful nocturnal missives from the beautiful, captivating, but ultimately empty junk mail of the subconscious. And for the ancient Greek sleeper, deciphering which gate their latest dream had flown through was a matter of no small importance. You're now well aware that the dreams dispatched by Morpheus and his brethren, the Oneiroi, could arrive through one of two very distinct portals: the Gate of Horn, bringing truths and prophecies, or the Gate of Ivory, delivering falsehoods and illusions. This, of course, presented a significant challenge to the ancient Greek sleeper. Waking from a vivid, perhaps unsettling or exhilarating dream, the immediate and pressing concern would be, how do I know if this was a genuine message from the gods? A true glimpse of what's to come, or just a beautiful, meaningless phantom designed to confuse or mislead me? This uncertainty fueled a whole industry, both formal and informal, dedicated to decoding Morpheus's nightly messages, the art and practice of dream interpretation. For the ancient Greeks, interpreting dreams was not a frivolous pastime. It was often a serious and highly respected endeavor, since dreams were widely considered to be a primary channel of communication between gods and mortals. Understanding their meaning was crucial for making important decisions, for foreseeing future events, and for maintaining a harmonious relationship with the divine. This is a mainstream historical fact. Dream interpretation, or oniromancy, was a significant practice in ancient Greece, with professional interpreters known as oneirokritai, analyzing dreams for individuals and even for city-states, and numerous ancient texts such as Artemidorus's Oneirokritika from the 2nd century CE compiled detailed methods and symbolic meanings for dream analysis. So, if you were an ancient Greek and had a particularly striking dream, say Morpheus sent you a vision of yourself crowned with laurels by a talking eagle while standing atop Mount Olympus, you wouldn't just shrug it off and go about your day. Your first step might be to consult an oneirokrites, a professional dream interpreter. These individuals, believed to possess special insight or knowledge passed down through tradition, would listen carefully to your account of the dream. They would consider not just the overt content, but also the symbols, the emotions evoked, your personal circumstances, and even what you ate for dinner the previous night, as indigestion was sometimes blamed for particularly chaotic or nonsensical dreams, probably those pesky ivory gate ones. It was like ancient psychotherapy, but with more divine portent and fewer discussions about your mother usually. The dream interpreter would then consult their knowledge, perhaps even written dream books or collections of past interpretations, to unravel the hidden meaning. Certain symbols had relatively fixed interpretations, though these could vary by region or by the specific school of thought the interpreter followed. For example, dreaming of flying might signify ambition or a desire for freedom, but if you flew too high and fell, it could be a warning against hubris. Dreaming of teeth falling out, yes, even then, was often seen as a bad omen, perhaps foretelling a loss or a death in the family. A good interpreter wouldn't just give you a generic meaning. They would try to tailor it to your specific life and concerns. They were part psychologist, part priest, and part walking encyclopedia of dream symbolism. Their services weren't always cheap, especially if they had a good reputation for accuracy. No Yelp reviews back then, so word of mouth was everything. Beyond professional interpreters, dreams were often discussed within families or communities. An elder with a reputation for wisdom might be consulted. Oracles like the famous oracle at Delphi could also be approached to seek clarification on particularly important or obscure dreams, especially those that seem to concern the fate of the state. Sometimes people would practice dream incubation, deliberately sleeping in a sacred place such as a temple of Asclepius, the god of healing, in the hope of receiving a divine dream that would provide a cure for an illness or guidance on a difficult problem. Morpheus would presumably be on call for these special incubated deliveries. There's a quirky and rather charming tidbit about some ancient Greek dream interpretation practices that involved a kind of dream dictionary approach, but with a personal twist. It was believed by some that a dream's meaning could be revealed by its opposite or by wordplay related to the dream's content. For example, if you dreamt of something sweet, it might actually foretell something bitter in your waking life. Or if a name was spoken in a dream, you might look for puns or anagrams related to that name to unlock its message. It suggests a playful, almost riddling quality to some interpretations, as if Morpheus enjoyed a good pun as much as a dramatic impersonation. Ah, you dreamt of a bear, Arctos. Clearly this means you will soon be brave Aristea in a difficult situation. Or maybe it just meant a bear was nearby and you should run. The process of interpretation was also influenced by the perceived source of the dream. If the dream clearly came through the Gate of Horn, perhaps because it was delivered by a figure known for truthfulness, or because it felt undeniably profound, then its message was taken very seriously as a direct communication. If, however, it had all the hallmarks of an Ivory Gate production, too fantastical, too self-serving, or delivered by a notoriously unreliable dream figure, it might be dismissed as isnipnean, a mere sleeping vision without prophetic weight. Historians still argue about the precise criteria ancient Greeks used to differentiate between true horned and false ivory dreams in practice beyond the literary motif. Was it purely the content, the emotional impact? Or were there specific ritual actions one could perform upon waking to test a dream's veracity or to avert a bad omen? Ultimately, decoding Morpheus's messages was an attempt to bridge the gap between the sleeping world and the waking one to find meaning and guidance in the ephemeral, often bizarre narratives that unfolded behind closed eyelids. It was a recognition that the subconscious mind, whether touched by the divine or simply processing its own material, held valuable insights, and that Morpheus, in his own way, was a messenger whose art, if properly understood, could illuminate the path ahead. You're now quite familiar with the intricate art of ancient Greek dream interpretation. The quest to understand whether Morpheus's nightly creations arrived via the truthful gate of horn or the deceptive gate of ivory. This desire to decode dreams stemmed from a core belief that these visions were often not mere random firings of the brain, but deliberate messages from the gods. Morpheus and his fellow Oneiroi, while powerful in their own right as children of night and sleep, often acted as divine messengers, intermediaries, carrying the will warnings or prophecies of the greater Olympian deities to slumbering mortals. Morpheus, with his special talent for human impersonation, was a particularly favored courier for these celestial communiques. Imagine the Olympian Council on Mount Olympus. Zeus, king of the gods, has a crucial message for a mortal king on earth. Perhaps a command to go to war, a warning about impending disaster, or even a subtle piece of advice for a favored hero. He wouldn't typically descend from his golden throne in a flash of lightning to deliver this message in person during waking hours. That was often too direct, too disruptive, or perhaps just too much effort. A dream was a far more subtle and often more psychologically potent method. This is a mainstream historical fact. In Greek mythology and literature, major Olympian gods like Zeus, Hera, Apollo, and Athena are frequently depicted as sending dreams oneiroi to mortals to convey their will influence events, or offer prophecies using these nocturnal visions as a key channel of divine human communication. Morpheus, as the specialist in human forms, would be the perfect agent for such a task. So, Zeus might summon Hypnos, the god of sleep, and instruct him to dispatch a dream. Hypnos, in turn, would delegate the specific crafting and delivery to one of his sons, most likely Morpheus, if the dream required a human apparition. Morpheus would then receive his divine briefing, appear to King Agamemnon in the guise of his trusted old counselor Nestor. Zeus might command as he does in Homer's Iliad. Tell him to prepare his armies for battle, for victory is assured. Of course, in that particular instance, Zeus was sending a deceptive dream via the Gate of Ivory to lure Agamemnon into a premature and ill-fated attack, but Morpheus still executed his part flawlessly. Morpheus's role here is crucial. He isn't just a passive conduit, he's an active shaper of the divine message. He has to embody the chosen human form so perfectly that the dreamer has no doubt about the messenger's identity and, by extension, the authenticity of the message. If the dream figure seemed off or unconvincing, the message might be dismissed. So Morpheus's artistry was directly in service to the Olympian gods, ensuring their pronouncements were delivered with maximum impact and believability within the dream state. He was the divine equivalent of a highly skilled diplomat or a master spy carrying sensitive information across the threshold of consciousness. It wasn't just Zeus who utilized Morpheus's services. Hera, queen of the gods, might send Morpheus to a queen or princess with dreams concerning marriage, childbirth, or dynastic intrigue. Apollo, god of prophecy, might use Morpheus to deliver a more enigmatic, symbolic dream that required further interpretation, perhaps by Apollo's own priests at Delphi. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, could dispatch Morpheus in the guise of a mentor to guide a favored hero. Even gods with less direct involvement in human affairs might occasionally require a dream to be sent at, and Morpheus with his versatile skills would be ready. You could imagine him having a very busy schedule, flitting from one divine client to another, meticulously crafting each dream to order. Okay, Hera needs a dream of a talking peacock for Queen Clytemnestra. Apollo wants a cryptic vision of a laurel wreath turning into a snake for the priestess at Didyma, and Zeus has another "you're going to win LOL" dream for some unfortunate general. It's going to be a long night. There's a quirky thought that Morpheus might have developed subtle ways of indicating which god was the ultimate source of the dream he was delivering, even while disguised as a mortal. Perhaps a faint scent of eagle feathers for Zeus, a shimmer of olive leaves for Athena, or an almost imperceptible echo of a lyre for Apollo, woven into the fabric of the dream for the truly perceptive dreamer or interpreter to catch. This is pure speculation, of course, but it adds a layer of intrigue to his role as a divine messenger. Historians still argue about the precise hierarchy and lines of communication within the realm of dreams. Was Morpheus always directly commanded by an Olympian? Or did he and his father Hypnos have some autonomy in sending dreams they deemed appropriate or necessary? Could lesser deities or even nature spirits petition Morpheus to deliver dreams on their behalf? The myths are not always specific on these operational details, but the overarching theme is that the dream world was not isolated. It was an active channel for communication between the divine and mortal realms, with Morpheus acting as a key facilitator. His ability to take on human form made him particularly valuable because it allowed the gods to communicate in a way that was relatable and emotionally resonant for mortals. A divine command from an abstract, terrifying god form might be overwhelming or easily dismissed as a mere nightmare. But a message delivered by a beloved ancestor, a trusted friend, or a respected authority figure, all perfectly impersonated by Morpheus, would penetrate much deeper into the dreamer's psyche, carrying both the weight of the divine sender and the familiarity of the human guise. Morpheus was thus not just a messenger, he was a divine translator, shaping celestial intent into a form that the human heart and mind could most readily accept and understand for better or for worse. You've now seen Morpheus in his crucial role as a divine messenger, skillfully crafting human forms to deliver the will of the Olympian gods to unsuspecting sleepers. His artistry was essential for these nocturnal communiques. But how did the ancient Greeks themselves picture this elusive deity of dreams? How was Morpheus along with his father? Hypnos and the broader concept of dreams depicted in their art and described in their literature, beyond Ovid's detailed accounts, exploring these representations can give us further insight into how the Greeks visualized and understood the ephemeral world of sleep and its divine architects. Visual depictions of Morpheus himself as a distinct named individual are relatively rare in surviving ancient Greek art, compared to, say, his father Hypnos or major Olympian gods. Hypnos, the god of sleep, is more commonly portrayed often as a youthful winged figure, sometimes bearded, sometimes beardless. He might be shown pouring sleep-inducing liquid from a horn, or carrying poppy stalks as we've discussed. Sometimes he's depicted gently tending to a sleeper, or even in the company of his twin brother Thanatos' death, highlighting the close, almost interchangeable nature of deep sleep and death in the Greek mindset. This is a mainstream historical fact. While hypnosleep is frequently depicted in Greek art, e.g., on vase reliefs and as statues often winged, specific, clearly identified representations of Morpheus as an individual are less common with dreams, more often being personified generally as oneiroi or implied through scenes of sleeping figures being visited. When Morpheus is alluded to, or when the oneiroi dream spirits in general are depicted, they are often shown as winged figures, emphasizing their ability to flit quickly and silently from their shadowy realm into the minds of mortals. Their wings, like those of Hypnos, are a key attribute signifying their ethereal nature and their swift passage. They might be shown as youthful, sometimes androgynous figures, their form perhaps slightly less defined than other gods, reflecting the changeable and insubstantial nature of dreams themselves. You might see them hovering over a sleeping mortal, perhaps whispering into their ear or presenting a symbolic image. Literary descriptions, particularly from poets, provide more detailed characterizations. Hesiod, in his Theogony, places the tribe of dreams, Phylon Oniron, among the children of Nyx night dwelling near their father Hypnos. Homer, in the Odyssey, famously describes the two gates of dreams, horn and ivory, giving a physical, if metaphorical, gateway for their passage. But it's Ovid, the Roman poet, writing in the Augustan age, but drawing heavily on Greek mythological traditions, who gives Morpheus his most detailed and individualized portrait in the Metamorphoses. Ovid is the one who truly fleshes out Morpheus as the specialist in human forms, and details his brothers Phobodor, Islus, and Phantasos, with their respective domains of animals, monsters, and inanimate objects. Ovid describes Morpheus as an artist and artifacts who can counterfeit with wondrous art the human form. He gives him dark wings and a silent flight, emphasizing his stealth and connection to the night. Yeah. So while a Greek vase painter might depict a generic winged oneros approaching a sleeper, a poet like Ovid could give that oneros a name, a specific skill set, and a personality. This highlights how mythology evolves with different artists and writers emphasizing or elaborating on different aspects of a divine figure. There's a quirky little detail in some artistic depictions of Hypnos, and by extension, one could imagine it for Morpheus. Sometimes small wings are shown sprouting directly from his temples or head rather than his back. This could symbolize the way sleep and dreams directly enter and affect the mind, a very literal representation of flight of thought or ideas taking wing within the head. Imagine Morpheus with these subtle little head wings like a divine thought bubble generator, ready to pop a fully formed human apparition into your dream. It's also worth noting that the places associated with dreams and sleep often featured in Greek art and imagination. Caves, dark groves, and springs were sometimes seen as sacred to chthonic or nocturnal deities, including those connected to dreams. Sanctuaries of healing gods like Asclepius, where dream incubation was practiced, would have specific architectural features designed to promote sleep and visionary dreams. Quiet, dark abaton chambers, where supplicants would sleep hoping for a divine visitation from the god, likely facilitated by Morpheus or his kin. These spaces themselves became part of the artistic and ritual landscape of dreaming. Historians still argue about the extent to which the highly detailed and somewhat systematic portrayal of the Oneiroi by Ovid reflects earlier lost Greek sources or his own poetic embellishment and organization. Was Ovid reporting on a well-established Greek belief about Morpheus Phobodor and Phantasos? Or was he taking more general ideas about dream spirits and giving them clearer, more defined roles for his narrative purposes? It's a classic question in the study of mythology, the interplay between traditional belief and individual artistic interpretation. What is clear is that the ancient Greeks, whether through the generalized image of a winged dream spirit or the more specific character of Morpheus, saw dreams not just as internal phenomena, but as entities or messages that came from outside the sleeper, from a divine or supernatural realm. There are in literature, even if not always providing a consistent, detailed portrait of Morpheus himself, consistently reinforce this idea of dreams as powerful, often divinely orchestrated visitations that required careful attention and interpretation. The very act of trying to depict an invisible internal experience, like a dream in visual art or vivid poetry, shows how deeply these nocturnal narratives captivated the Greek imagination and how important the crafters of those narratives, like Morpheus, were in their understanding of the world. You've now seen how Morpheus was visualized, however elusively, in ancient Greek art and literature, primarily as the skilled craftsman of human forms in our dreams, often a messenger for the Olympian gods. His work, while sometimes delivering unsettling truths or even deceptions via the ivory gate, was generally focused on believable human interaction within the dreamscape. But Morpheus was not the only Oneiros with a powerful impact on the nightly visions of ancient Greek sleepers. He had brothers, and one in particular known to mortals as Phobodor, specialized in a far more visceral and often terrifying form of dream artistry, the conjuring of beasts, monsters, and all manner of frightening apparitions. If Morpheus was the subtle character actor of your dreams, Phobodor was the director of your internal horror movies. As we touched upon earlier, the gods had a different name for this particular dream weaver. They called him Islus, perhaps referencing his skill in creating things that were like or resembling real creatures, or even fantastical ones. But mortals who experienced his handiwork as raw primal fear knew him by the name Phobodor, meaning the frightener or the terrifier. This name alone tells you much about his specialty. His role, as detailed by Ovid, was to take on the form of any beast bird or serpent, filling dreams with the wild, the untamed, and the monstrous. This is a mainstream historical fact. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, Phobodor, also called Islus by the gods, is presented as one of the Oneiroi, a son of Somnus Hypnos whose specific function was to appear in dreams in the guise of animals, monsters, and other non-human creatures, often to inspire fear. Imagine the dreams Phobodor might craft. For a shepherd sleeping uneasily on a hillside, Phobetor might conjure a pack of unnervingly large shadow-black wolves with eyes like burning coals, silently circling his flock. For a sailor nodding off at his post, he might send a vision of a colossal squid with writhing tentacles emerging from the inky depths, threatening to crush the ship. For a child tucked into bed, perhaps a hissing gorgon with snakes for hair, or a snorting minotaur navigating the labyrinth of their bedchamber. These weren't just vague anxieties. Phobetor gave them form movement and terrifying reality within the dream. He was the master of the jump scare ancient Greek style. His work probably led to many an ancient Greek sleeper waking up in a cold sweat heart, pounding, muttering, "By Zeus, that was not Morpheus." This specialization is interesting because it highlights the Greek understanding that dreams weren't just about messages or human interactions. They could also be deeply primal, tapping into instinctual fears of the natural world and the monstrous unknown. Phobetor's creations were the personification of those fears. He didn't necessarily need to deliver a complex narrative or a divine edict. His purpose was often to evoke a powerful emotional response, primarily terror. This could, of course, serve a purpose. A dream of a dangerous beast might be a very effective, if unpleasant, divine warning to avoid a certain path or to be more vigilant. Or it could simply be the gods having a bit of fun at mortal expense, or the subconscious mind working through its anxieties about the wild and unpredictable aspects of life. One can imagine a sort of divine division of labor. If a god wanted to send a nightmare to a king, to unnerve him, they might specifically request Phobetor's services. Hypnos, old boy. Zeus might say King Creon is getting a bit too arrogant. Send Phobetor down there tonight with his giant eagle with the voice of a disappointed tax collector routine. That should sort him out. Morpheus would handle the human-shaped rebukes. Phobetor dealt with the creature features. There's a quirky fringe idea that perhaps some ancient Greek monster myths themselves might have been partly inspired or reinforced by particularly vivid Phobetor-crafted nightmares that were then recounted and embellished in the telling. If enough people dreamt of a specific type of terrifying creature after, say, a local volcanic eruption or earthquake events, that might inspire collective anxiety and strange dreams. Stories of that creature might take root in local folklore. Phobetor, in this sense, could have been an unintentional, or perhaps intentional, if he enjoyed the fame co-author of some regional bestiaries. The contrast between Morpheus and Phobetor is quite telling. Morpheus's art was one of subtlety, realism in human portrayal, and often coherent narrative or message. Phobetor's art was one of impact, primal fear, and the raw power of the non-human. While Morpheus might craft a dream of a deceased ancestor offering gentle advice, Phobetor would craft a dream of that same ancestor's tomb being guarded by a slavering Cerberus with 3 heads, each one reciting bad poetry. Okay, maybe not the bad poetry, but you get the idea of his different, more alarming focus. Historians still argue about the degree to which the ancient Greeks differentiated between various types of bad dreams. Were all nightmares attributed to Phobetor, or were there other minor fear-inducing spirits, or were some simply seen as the product of illness or a troubled mind without divine intervention? The systematization provided by Ovid is very neat, but popular belief might have been more fluid and less specific about which dream god was responsible for last night's vision of being chased by a very angry and surprisingly fast snail. Phobetor's role reminds us that the dream world for the ancient Greeks was not always a place of gentle messages or wise counsel. It could also be a realm of terror, a place where their deepest anxieties about the natural world, the monstrous and the unknown, could take vivid, terrifying shape. He was the necessary counterpart to Morpheus, representing the darker, more chaotic, and often more frightening potential of the human imagination. When released from the constraints of waking reality, all under the silent, watchful eyes of the gods of night and sleep. His were the dreams you definitely didn't want to linger over with your morning cup of probably not frothy wine. You've now met Morpheus, the dream world's master of human impersonation, and his rather more alarming brother Phobetor, who specialized in conjuring terrifying beasts and monsters into your nightly slumber. They formed a formidable duo covering a vast range of animate dream apparitions. But there was a third key brother in this divine triumvirate of dreamcrafters, another son of Hypnos who carved out his own unique niche in the art of shaping our nocturnal visions, Phantasos. His specialty was the inanimate world, the realm of objects, illusions, and the often bizarre, surreal landscapes that can form the backdrop or even the central focus of our dreams. If Morpheus built the characters and Phobetor provided the scary extras, Phantasos was the set designer, the prop master, and the director of special inanimate effects. As his name suggests, derived from the Greek phantasma meaning apparition, image, or illusion, giving us our words fantasy and phantasm, Phantasos was an expert in creating deceptive and often wondrous or deeply unsettling inanimate imagery. Ovid, our primary guide to these dream siblings, tells us that Phantasos could artfully imitate earth rocks, water trees, and all inanimate things. This is a mainstream historical fact. According to Ovid in his Metamorphoses, Phantasos was one of the three principal oneiroi, specializing in creating dream images of inanimate objects and illusions complementing his brothers. Morpheus, human forms, and Phobetor/Iceless, animal forms. His role was to complete the dreamscape with all its non-living elements. Imagine the kind of dreams Phantasos might construct. He could make a familiar landscape shift and transform in impossible ways. Mountains might turn to water, trees might grow cutlery instead of leaves, or your own house might suddenly sprout wings and fly away. He could make inanimate objects behave as if they were alive. A statue might weep tears of blood, a sword might speak prophecies, or the very stones of a road might rise up to block your path. These weren't necessarily nightmares in the terrifying creature-filled sense that Phobetor delivered, but they could be deeply disorienting, symbolic, or filled with a strange, dreamlike logic that defied waking understanding. Phantasos was the master of the uncanny valley, but for objects and environments. He was probably responsible for those dreams where you're trying to run, but the ground turns to treacle, or where a door you desperately need to open keeps shrinking. His work was essential for creating a complete and immersive dream world. Morpheus might provide the perfect human form of a messenger, and Phobetor might add a symbolic animal, but Phantasos would craft the specific room in which the messenger appears. The quality of the light filtering through the window, the texture of the chair the dreamer imagines sitting on, and perhaps even the strange, out-of-place pineapple inexplicably resting on the mantelpiece. He filled in all the details, the background scenery, and the often symbolic props that give dreams their unique, sometimes baffling character. He was the god of "why is there a fish in a tree" type dreams. One could imagine Phantasos taking a particular artistic delight in the surreal and the paradoxical. Perhaps he enjoyed creating dreamscapes that subtly violated the laws of physics, or that juxtaposed ordinary objects in extraordinary, thought-provoking ways. A dream crafted by Phantasos might not carry an obvious narrative message, like one from Morpheus impersonating an ancestor, but it could be rich in symbolism, prompting the dreamer and their interpreter to ponder the meaning of its strange, inanimate elements. Why did I dream of a river flowing with honey or a tree made of bronze? These were the kinds of questions Phantasos' handiwork would inspire. There's a quirky little idea that Phantasos might have been the go-to dream crafter for artisans, architects, or anyone whose waking life revolved around shaping and creating inanimate objects. Perhaps a potter struggling with a new design might receive a dream from Phantasos featuring a vessel of unearthly beauty and perfect form. Or an architect might dream of a magnificent, impossible building, its geometry both inspiring and perplexing. Phantasos could provide divine inspiration, or perhaps divine frustration through these visions of perfected or bizarrely altered inanimate things. I dreamt of a self-stirring cauldron last night. The village cook might exclaim, Phantasos is clearly hinting I need an assistant. His illusions weren't always benign or inspiring, of course. He could create deceptive appearances. A treasure chest that turns out to be full of dust. A sturdy-looking bridge that crumbles as you step on it, or a beautiful, inviting oasis in the desert that proves to be a mirage. In this, his work could complement the deceptions sent through the Gate of Ivory. A false message delivered by Morpheus might be made all the more convincing if it occurred in a dreamscape artfully constructed by Phantasos to appear trustworthy and appealing. Historians still argue about how literally the ancient Greeks interpreted the inanimate nature of Phantasos' creations. Did they believe he only dealt with things that were truly lifeless? Or could his domain extend to creating the appearance of things that seemed real but were ultimately illusions, even if they had a semblance of life? The boundaries between the Oneiroi's specialties might have been somewhat fluid in popular imagination, or perhaps they collaborated on particularly complex dream productions, like a divine film crew. Together, the trinity of Morpheus, Phobetor, and Phantasos covered the full spectrum of dream imagery. Morpheus populated dreams with recognizable human figures bringing messages and familiar interactions. Phobetor unleashed the beasts and monsters tapping into primal fears and instincts. And Phantasos, the often overlooked master of the inanimate, provided the rich, symbolic, and sometimes utterly surreal environments in which these dream dramas unfolded. He was the shaper of the silent witnesses, the dream world's architect of landscapes, both beautiful and bizarre, reminding sleepers that even the most ordinary objects could hold extraordinary meaning in the fleeting phantasmagorical realm of night. You've now journeyed with Morpheus and his brothers Phobetor and Phantasos through the shadowy dream-crafting studios of ancient Greece. You've seen Morpheus meticulously shaping human forms, Phobetor conjuring fearsome beasts, and Phantasos weaving illusions from inanimate objects. You've visited their abode near the gates of horn and ivory, pondered the significance of poppy-induced slumber, and considered how gods and mortals alike sought meaning in these nightly visions. As our exploration of how Morpheus crafted dreams for ancient Greek sleepers draws to its gentle close, it's worth reflecting on the enduring legacy of this fascinating deity and the concepts he embodied. For even though the pantheon of ancient Greek gods is no longer actively worshipped, Morpheus, in a way, still visits us every night. The most direct and obvious legacy of Morpheus is in our language. When we speak of falling into the arms of Morpheus, we are directly invoking this ancient Greek god of dreams, acknowledging him as the bringer of sleep and the visions that accompany it. The very word morphine, that powerful opium-derived analgesic and sedative named in the 19th century, pays homage to Morpheus, linking his name to the poppy's ability to induce a state of drowsy, dream-filled oblivion. These linguistic echoes are a testament to the powerful hold that the classical understanding of dreams and the figure of Morpheus in particular has had on Western culture. This is a mainstream historical fact. The name Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams, has had a lasting impact on language and culture, most notably lending his name to the potent analgesic drug morphine and the common idiom, "in the arms of Morpheus," to describe being asleep. But beyond these direct linguistic traces, the ancient Greek concept of dreams as crafted meaningful experiences, often shaped by external divine entities like Morpheus, resonates with enduring human questions about the nature of consciousness and the meaning of our inner lives. While modern science offers neurological explanations for dreaming, REM sleep, memory consolidation, emotional processing, the experience of dreaming often still feels as mysterious, symbolic, and sometimes as profoundly other as it must have to the ancient Greeks. We still wake from dreams that feel incredibly real, that carry a powerful emotional charge, or that present us with bizarre, surreal landscapes worthy of Phantasos himself. The idea of dreams as messages, whether from gods or from our own deeper subconscious, also persists. Dream interpretation, though now more often framed in psychological rather than divine terms, remains a popular practice. We still seek meaning in the symbols and narratives of our dreams, hoping to understand our anxieties, our desires, our unresolved conflicts. In this sense, we are still in a way trying to decode Morpheus's messages, even if we now see him as a metaphor for the creative storytelling aspect of our own minds. Perhaps Morpheus isn't an external deity, but the Jungian archetype of the wise old man, or the trickster, or the beloved appearing from the depths of our own psyche. He's become an internal dream shaper. The Greek distinction between true dreams from the gate of horn and false dreams from the gate of ivory also continues to have a certain psychological relevance. We all know the experience of a deeply reassuring dream that feels true and uplifting versus a confusing, anxiety-ridden dream that we instinctively feel is just a dream best dismissed. Our intuition still tries to sort the horned from the ivory, the meaningful from the illusory. It's a bit like trying to decide if that amazing online deal is legitimate or just a very convincing pop-up ad from the digital equivalent of the Ivory Gate. There's a quirky, rather modern way Morpheus's legacy lives on in fiction and popular culture. From Neil Gaiman's portrayal of Dream, often equated with Morpheus in the Sandman comic series, to characters in movies and video games who can manipulate dreams, the idea of a powerful entity who crafts or controls our nocturnal visions continues to fascinate us. These modern interpretations often play with the same themes. The Greeks explored the power of dreams, their potential for prophecy or deception, and their deep connection to our innermost selves. Morpheus, it seems, is still a compelling character, even after all these centuries. Historians still argue about the precise level of belief versus metaphor in the ancient Greek understanding of gods like Morpheus. Did every Greek literally believe a winged deity was handcrafting their dream of losing their teeth? Or was Morpheus sometimes a poetic way of personifying the mysterious process of dreaming itself? It was likely a blend with literal belief, perhaps stronger in earlier periods or among certain groups, and a more metaphorical or psychological understanding emerging among philosophers and later thinkers. But regardless of the precise nature of their belief, the ancient Greeks, through figures like Morpheus Phobetor and Phantasos, gave us a rich and imaginative framework for thinking about dreams. They acknowledged their power, their beauty, their terror, and their profound connection to the human condition. They saw dreams not as mere fluff, but as a significant realm of experience worthy of divine artists and careful mortal interpretation. So the next time you find yourself drifting off, perhaps you'll spare a thought for Morpheus, the original dream weaver, and the long lineage of artists, storytellers, and sleepy thinkers who have pondered the meaning of his ephemeral nightly creations. His craft endures in the quiet theater of your mind. And so, our journey into the realm of Morpheus, the divine artisan of ancient Greek dreams, comes to its gentle end. The shadowy figures of night and sleep and their skilled children. The Oneiroi begin to recede into the mists of mythology, their work for this night and for this story now complete. You've walked the poppy-strewn paths of Hypnos' domain, peered through the gates of horn and ivory, and witnessed the meticulous crafting of visions both wondrous and terrifying. The whispers from that ancient world, the soft rustle of Morpheus's soundless wings, the distant echo of a hero's prophetic dream, or a peasant's fleeting nocturnal hope, all now merge into the soothing silence of your own approaching slumber. Let the weight of ages and the complexities of myth dissolve into a simple, peaceful calm. The need to interpret, to understand, to decode can rest now. There are no more messages to decipher, no more shadowy forms to identify, only the gentle invitation to surrender to the quiet darkness. May your own dreams tonight be kind, perhaps touched by a hint of that ancient creative magic, but above all, may they lead you to a deep and profoundly restful sleep. The realm of Morpheus now fades, and only your own serene breathing remains a soft rhythm in the stillness of the night.